B.
Hey everybody, it's Amanda.
Rick.
And it's time for our Bible study. Today we are doing an evening one. We announced it, if you aren't aware, in our Facebook group. Let everybody know that we were going to be doing it late today. My hair is crazy because it is late, but just ignore that. We'll be in the Bible. So I hope you all had a wonderful day.
Yes.
I had to see my mom off this morning, and she made it safely home. So I was very thankful this year that she could visit with us, spend some time with us. And I miss her already. Rick said that he missed her already.
I do.
So, it's hard to see family go, but we were glad that she could spend time with us. So anyway, we are going to continue our Bible study tonight in Exodus 22. Maybe you haven't had a chance to follow along with us in our morning Bible study, but we are going through, we started in Genesis, now we're going through Exodus, and it's been interesting. We're in the law, and it's always a topic of conversation.
Yeah, if you haven't watched in a couple days, we're, like you said, we're in the law. And if you have an ox, we've been talking about what we should do with the ox. You know what I mean? And yeah, I know. But it's been an interesting study. And I will say this, and it's going to be my big point tonight, in all seriousness. The cat's.
Amen already.
Amen. Is that what it is? I thought she was heckling us. I don't know if you ever do the flashcards. Is it a child thing? No, I think it's a good thing all around, whether you're an older or a younger person. What? I did a flashcard tonight. You ever do the memory cards and everything? Well, I can't, what we're covering tonight is the law, and we're going to talk about what happens if you have a thief, what happens if you have a this or that, something come in your life, punishments and all this kind of stuff. But it really, it boils down to just this. The Lord wants us to be concerned about our neighbors, to watch out for them, care for them, love them, and not try to hurt, hinder, kill one another, but really to really hold up one another. Number one, we're to hold up the Lord's name, love Him, honor Him, glorify Him, obey Him. And then, what do we do other than that? We need to love one another. Yeah. So
Jesus said that was the whole law.
And it's really my point for this entire chapter tonight. It boils down to this. Someone came to Jesus in Matthew chapter 22, and I was just looking at verse 36 to 40. It says, Master, talking to Jesus, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus, no hesitation, he said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. You consume with the Lord. You love Him genuinely, truly. Like Paul said, for me to live is Christ. Everything about me in my life is Jesus Christ. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Now here's the other part. Thou shalt love thy neighbor. Now who's your neighbor? Everybody's your neighbor. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So, folks, we're to love God above all, obviously. We're to love our neighbor. Love our neighbor as ourselves. I'm doing good to you. I'm not doing harm, kind of thing. It's your gain at my loss, perhaps. But whatever happens, I'm loving you. And I'm doing what I can do to push you ahead. Yes. Anyway, okay, you ready? All right. I'll bring that up several times. You keep staring at me like something's up.
I'll listen to you.
Okay. I'm going to say that several times tonight, because really we're getting into another chapter of the law, and there's a lot of do's and don'ts. And if you do this, this is going to happen. And somebody will come along and say, well, how do I apply that to my life in 2020? What is the application, Beals?
Well, can I say something about that?
Yes.
Okay, so two things. Number one, God's law is good.
Mm-hmm.
God's law was good then, and it's good now.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I prefaced this yesterday, sometimes we read God's law, we're like, and we don't understand it. And I will freely tell you there are things in God's law that I look at and I think to myself, I do not understand how that is good. I don't. There are things I don't understand that don't make sense to me. But here's what I know. God is good.
Right.
And his goals, it's not even goals, his rules for his people were good then, are still good now. And if I don't understand it, the problem is with me and my understanding. The problem is not with him. So anyway, the idea is that sometimes we'll read these and we'll look at them with modern eyes, and it'll be just, it won't make sense to us. And I will I often try to make sense of it, but I just got to have the understanding, number one, that it's God's law and it's good. But also, when you look at it from the New Testament Christian understanding, we need the law. We need the law to understand what God's expectations are, because like I said, it's completely foreign to what we understand as good and right in our modern culture. It just goes against everything that modern culture teaches. And we need to understand what God's expectations are so we understand how far we fall short of his perfection. And we need to understand that so we understand our need for him. So it's valuable. Don't think it's not valuable to read the Old Testament law. I think a lot of people disregard it, think it's unimportant, don't even read it, but the Lord has it in his word for a reason. So it's valuable. Embrace it. We're going to go through it. We're going to plow through it. And I think he's going to give us some wisdom from it. All right. So we are in Exodus 22. I'm going to read the whole chapter. We're going to go back over it. Like Rick said, it's really all about loving your neighbor and really just being responsible for yourself.
That's really the point. And this is a continuation from yesterday. And it mentions again the ox, the sheep, the this, that, and the other. And you're like, well, maybe you live in a city. You don't have an ox. But I hope you understand, like she said, like I said, like the verse says from Matthew 22 about loving God and loving your neighbor. Really, the application that we can make tonight is that God just wants us to do good to others. It talks about the thief. It talks about the consequences of a thief. And the application I make of that right away is, hey, being a thief is wrong. In Exodus 20, we just read that, thou shalt not steal. And it's just more emphasis that, hey, in motivation, being a thief is wrong. And what's the opposite of being a thief? Not taking from your neighbor, but maybe even this, giving to your neighbor, going the second mile and actually loving your neighbor as yourself. And all of it is really a motivator to me to be good to others,
All right. I just want to take a moment and also shout out all the lovely ladies who are the original folks who are here.
I'm noticing that.
Melissa and Shania and Lila and Melissa Miller. And I love all the folks that come, but it's just
the night owls.
When you get the original folks in, it just feels like you're at home, right? This does feel like Thanksgiving weekend, like the families come home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, ladies. So we're going to start with the property laws. Exodus 22, starting at verse 1. If a man shall steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief be found breaking up and be smitten that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him. If the sun be risen upon him, there shall be blood shed for him, for he should make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or ass or sheep, he shall restore double. If a man shall cause a field or vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field, of the best of his own field, and of the best of his own vineyard shall he make restitution. If fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of corn and the standing corn or the field be consumed therewith, he that kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges to see whether he have put his hand unto his neighbor's goods. For all manner of trespass, whether it be for ox, for ass, for sheep, for raiment, or for any manner of lost thing which another challengeth to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whom the judges shall condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass, or an ox, or a sheep, or any beast to keep, and it die, or be hurt, or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand unto his neighbor's goods. And the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good. And if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn. If a man borrow aught of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, the owner thereof being not with it, he shall surely make it good. But if the owner thereof be with it, he shall not make it good. It be an hired thing, it came for his hire. If a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Whosoever lieth with a beast shall surely be put to death. He that sacrificeth unto any god save unto the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Ye shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If thou afflict them in any wise, and they cry at all unto me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him any as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver to him by that the sun goeth down, for that is his covering only, it is his raiment for his skin. Wherein shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. Thou shalt not revile the gods, nor curse the ruler of thy people. Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits, and of thy liquors. The firstborn of thy son shalt thou give unto me. Likewise shalt thou do with thine oxen and with thy sheep. 7 days it shall be with his dam, and on the 8th day thou shalt give it to me. And ye shall be holy men unto me. Neither shall ye eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field. Ye shall cast it to the dogs. So that is the set of instructions, rules, laws from Exodus chapter 22, and it starts with property laws. And it starts talking about theft. So the idea, remember, these were the laws, and we've talked, like I said, the past few days about how if you take, the U.S. law books from the country and then the state and then the city and the counties, you would have a tremendous amount of law. Mm-hmm. And here we had over 600,000 people that were going to be ruled by this law. And so you had to have the actual law. It had to be simple, something everyone could understand, and there had to be consequences because they had to have a reason to maintain this law. So the property laws that we're talking about that involved theft, mm-hmm. to start with, because there's a wide variety of topics here. But starting with theft, the idea that if a man steals an ox or a sheep, he's got to restore it, but he's not just going to repay that back. It's 5 times as much for an oxen and 4 times as much for a sheep. Mm-hmm. So, remember, thou shalt not steal was one of the 10 commandments.
Right.
So the 10 commandments were like the basis of the law, like the moral code, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Still commandments, but the basis. This is getting it down into the details. Specifically, if you do this, this is the consequence.
Yeah.
I think this would be really good for parents.
It's adding details to the original commandment. All right, thou shalt not steal. Okay. you can say it easy.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk about it where the Lord's talking about it now. This is what I mean when I say thou shalt not steal. These are the branches of the tree.
Mhm.
And it talks about if you steal property, an ox, a sheep, it mentions. If you steal one, you're going to give back a lot more than you steal, kind of thing. The obvious thing is don't steal. Okay, the Lord's trying to say here, don't steal, and I mean it, because if you do, it's going to cost you dearly.
Yes.
Okay, you take a little, you're going to give back a lot. Okay, so that's God's plan there.
Oh man, and he does break it down into details here, but you got to remember too, there's a lot of details that aren't covered, like we talked about before, and when Christ was talking and said, it says you shouldn't commit adultery, but if you look at a woman to lust after her, it's committing adultery in your heart. So these are details that they're trying to help them obey within community, but understand that it still goes deeper than this. So the general idea is that if you take something from someone, you can't just return that to them and think that that's enough. You need to go over and above, because there's losses beyond just that once you've taken it to them. So but he does give some specifics,
and it really shows you the value that God places on your neighbor. We are a part of a creation that God's put us in, and we're all equal here. Now, folks, some of us are God's children, and some of us still need to become God's children by faith. But the God looks down, and we're all people. I'm not better than anyone else out there. No one out there is better than me. And the Lord does not give me the go ahead to go just take what I want. Your house, your possessions is my buffet, and I'm just going to go take what I want. No, the Lord does not allow Richard to be able to do that, and the Lord has never allowed his people to do that. Don't take. These are God's people. He's not talking to the Egyptians. He's talking to the people that he took out of Egypt, his people, the people that he has his promise with. And he's saying, even among these people, I love you so much, but I'm looking at a bunch of potential thieves, and I got to correct this in advance. If you steal, it's going to cost you more than you're willing to pay or want to pay, really.
And like I said before, I really think parents would do well to read this and understand how to raise children that are obedient, because even though they made mistakes, he understood that there needed to be consequences, and strong consequences. And I think that we probably err on the side of being too easy sometimes. I think we really need strong consequences for children when it's major issues like this. I mean, I think of a lot of times little children steal things, and they need to have some consequences that are strong. So they understand it's not something that they should be doing.
If you take your sister's cat, you only have to give her 4, that kind of thing.
Well, I would say sometimes I see people steal, especially when I'm at Target. I never know if I should say something because I don't like confrontation. Does that make me a bad person for not saying something? Well, I mean, if you take it, I don't think the Bible lays out anything like that. And, I haven't memorized it all. So maybe there's something that I'm not aware of. But I think if you take it on the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself, if it were your store and your things, how would you want someone else to treat your things? You know what I mean? If someone knew that someone else was stealing from you, wouldn't you want them to let you know? I'm not saying you should confront the individual who's stealing. That's dangerous.
No,
I don't think that's a good idea.
I wouldn't say confront the individual, but
you might let someone know
an associate.
Because
even then there's a chain of command. If you notify a regular associate, many times the regular associate's not supposed to confront the individual. They're to tell a manager, kind of deal. And then it just keeps going up from there. So, but
generally speaking, the rule of thumb should just be, that idea of loving your neighbor, loving the Lord and loving your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. I agree with that. But in bottom line, we understand that stealing is wrong, and the Lord's laying it out here that we are not to take from others. And bottom line, I'll say this, is that this is about having a relationship with the Lord. And we read in Matthew how the Lord provides. He provides for the sparrow. He's going to provide for me. And when you, as a child of God, think you need to go and take something from someone else in order for you to have something, you're taking away from the Lord, who is your provider. You know, the Lord is glorified when he provides for you. He is honored when you thank him and praise him for being your provider. Don't take that away from the Lord. The Lord wants to provide for you. Don't go and think you have to come up with a way to getting it, stealing it, unjust gain. So if you need something, the Lord knows about it. Just tell him about it. Lord, you know, I need, you know, the Lord is in the blessing business. You know, if he thinks that you need it, if it's part of his will for your life, you know, the Lord is not broke. You know what I'm saying? He'll bless you with it if it's part of his will and his plan for your life, you know?
Right. So the Lord takes the whole idea of theft very seriously, right? So it says, if a thief be found breaking up or breaking in and be smitten that he die, right? And there, no blood's going to be shed for him. If you're breaking in someone's house and they kill you, then, oh, well, then that's your fault. You know, the owner isn't going to be punished. It says, if the sun be risen upon him, so like if, you know, he lives, if nobody catches him, he escapes, there shall be blood shed for him, for he should make full restitution. Let me just pull back here for 1 second. All right. But if it happens after sunrise, I'm going to the Hebrew. There is guilt for his bloodshed. He has to make full restitution. If he has nothing, he will be sold to pay for his theft. So there's no, well, I don't have anything, so I guess that I can just get away with it. No, you will pay. If necessary, you'll be sold to do that. Yeah. And it says, if he found with whatever he stole alive in his hand, not only does he have to pay it back, but again, like the thief at the beginning, he has to restore it more than what he paid in the first place. It says he has to restore it to double. So the idea is that, you know, the Lord takes this idea of stealing very seriously, and he should, because, you know, people feed their families. You know, you don't really know what's going on in people's lives. I feel like a lot of times people steal from people they think are like so rich, and then they really aren't rich. You know, I remember when I was in high school, there was these guys that I went to high school with that they actually ended up going to jail for murder. And what happened was they broke into this man's house, and they thought he was rich because they grew up in a really poor neighborhood, and where this man, he was a teacher. And I mean, we adults here know teachers are not rich, but comparatively speaking, they thought he was like a rich man, and he lived in a nicer house, right? And they went to the man's house to steal from him, and they ended up killing the man. And the only thing that they were able to take from the man's house was like $200 worth of quarters. They didn't find any cash there, because come to find out, the man, he was like, I think he actually had retired as a teacher and had some medical bill. Like, he was actually struggling financially. But there's this idea, for some reason, people always think that other people have it better than them, and they always feel like that stealing from them, like it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of people steal from corporations. You know, like Lyle was talking about stealing from Target. And they're like, well, they've got insurance. They'll cover it. But, you know, when you do that, you actually take money from the employees, because there's so much theft. You know, stores, you worked in Walmart for a long time. Every year stores, they get bonuses or don't get bonuses based on the theft. You know, their raises every year are based on that. You know, ultimately, and plus the prices will go up for the individual consumer. I mean, you're really hurting everyone when you're even when you think that, you know, oh, it's so big, it doesn't matter. It matters, and you're hurting people. And people don't think it that. They think that it's kind of like a crime where no one gets hurt if you're just stealing. It does hurt people. And so you really have to, people have to understand that it's bigger than that. And that's why the Lord made such serious consequences. To the extent that if someone was killed breaking into someone's house, then that was fine. You know what I mean? If they died, then that was their problem. It was, if they had to work to pay off 5 times as much, if they had to even be sold into slavery themselves to make up for that money, he takes it that seriously. So theft, and people I don't think take theft seriously nowadays. I remember when Ricky was telling the story about talking to someone about whether or not they'd broken the 10 Commandments. And he asked the person, he said, well, have you ever stolen anything? And I was like, I've never stolen anything. He's like, you never downloaded anything illegally off the internet? He was like, well, everybody's done that. And again, that's just one of those things that, we just do it. We might do it casually and not think anything of it. But there are consequences to it. So just a thought there, theft, it's certainly worse in God's eyes than people see it in everyday life.
I agree. We can really, excuse me, go on. Just like the motivator, really, honestly, I mean, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be a thief. Seriously. And you're like, well, okay, I'm not going to break into someone's house. But like you said, we can steal all kinds of different ways. The idea is if it's not yours, don't go for it. Don't take anything. No unjust gain kind of thing. It's good to work for something. It's good to pray for something and be blessed of something. Or from, the Lord bless you. But we are not to take from our neighbors, period. And our neighbors, that's everyone. Even taking from a store, essentially, you're stealing. You're being a thief. Some people will say, well, I won't steal from my neighbor, but I don't care if I steal from a store, they're insured, kind of thing. Well, that's still stealing. Because ultimately, what? Our sin is not against our neighbor and against that store. Our sin is against God. God says we're holy. We're a holy people because we're saved by a holy God. Do not show who you are in Christ by being a thief. All
right, you go to 5. I'm going to grab some water.
Oh, you throwing it on me?
You got it.
Okay. She threw it on me. Okay, let's see. So 5. If a man shall cause a field or vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field of the best of his own field, and of the best of his own vineyard, shall he make restitution. So the idea is that if someone lets loose one of their animals deliberately, I would say, in someone's field or vineyard, and it damages another man's field or vineyard. Okay, you say, okay, I have animals, they need to graze. No one's looking. I'm gonna loose my animals into your vineyard or in your field, and I'm going to let my animals feed off of your land, kind of thing. You didn't say I could do it. I'm just going to do it. All right. Then the idea is that he must pay the damages by giving the owner of the field or vineyard an equal amount of the best of his own crop. Okay. And again, the idea is that you just don't steal from your neighbor. And these are little practical things. Like I said before, some of you, you live in neighborhoods or you live in a city or something. You don't have animals that are going to graze in someone else's field, but we can make application of this, that just because it would be really beneficial for me in my life to take a little bit from my neighbor's abundance, that doesn't make it right. Okay. I'm not to seek my own benefit. I'm really careful for my neighbors, make sure they have enough. And if it's not mine, then that's plain and simple. It's not mine to take, kind of thing.
I was thinking, we used to live in townhouses in Maryland, and everybody had a little tiny square of a yard, right? And there were people who would walk their pets and allow their pets to use the restroom in other people's yards, right? They wouldn't let their pet do it in their yard, because their yard they kept manicured.
Yeah, so that's a decent application.
But they would let it happen in or even at the playground area, or you know what I'm saying? they didn't care about other people's property. They only cared about their own property. And I think like a comparable would be to say, if you, whatever it costs to take care of their property, get it cleaned up, get it manicured, you would need to do that. You know what I'm saying? But again, the idea is just that, we don't have, like you said, oxen. Most of us don't anyway, that would graze in someone else's field. But the idea is that you have to take the best of yours to replace. Like you would say, well, they don't even care about their yard. It doesn't matter. It matters to the Lord. It's theirs. It's not yours. So the best of yours would go to take care of theirs.
And I honestly think that a lot of us would get that, that the only way to make it right. I mean, this is stuff that would probably go before Judge Judy kind of stuff. These are just little civil problems that we would have in town, and somebody down the street, and this isn't something that's going to make it to the Supreme Court if it happened today. But these are little ways of making sure that we're all neighborly and getting along, and that we can all exist in this little society that we have. That if you do something to your neighbor, take something from your neighbor, to make it right, you take the very best of what you have, and then you go and you say, hey, here you go, kind of thing. And yes, and the Lord knows that we're not going to do that naturally. We're not going to just all of a sudden say, hey, you know what? Well, I'm going to give you the very best that I have.
We'll try to do the minimum.
The Lord knows man's heart. That's why he has to put it in law. You follow what I'm saying? So we have to be told and instructed and commanded by God, because that's the heart of man.
You always have that one guy that lets his herd roam free.
That's true.
That's true, though.
That's true. You have your neighbor there, and he's got a field, and he tills the ground, and he just takes care of everything. And then you have some livestock down the road, and
I'm feeling convicted now. We got some cats that roam free.
But they're not eating the crops. At least I don't think they are. But I will say we have a neighbor that lets,
they keep them mind.
That let their goats
and the dogs and the donkeys.
Goats run free, and we have had some visiting goats.
The donkey hasn't made it over here.
Actually, I took a picture of that earlier in the summer and put it on my Instagram. We have some neighbors that have some goats, and sometimes the goats they become wanderers, and they wandered their way into my yard and was eating. But I'll be honest with you, it didn't offend me. I wasn't, didn't want to. I'm like, eat all of it, right down to the dirt. I don't want to cut any grass. But anyhow.
All right. Now, we're only at verse 6. We got to hurry. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns in the stacks of corn or standing field, he that kindled the fire shall make restitution. So, and, we've had a lot of problems with this in our country. I think it was in the early part of the year, they had all of those fires break out in the West. And they were actually trying to figure out who started those fires and trying to make them responsible for what it cost to put those fires out. And those fires had cost people their lives, it cost people their homes, they cost people their businesses. And the idea with really all of these things is really just taking personal responsibility for your actions.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much effort to make sure your animals, if they're doing their business in other people's yards, that you clean up after them. It doesn't take much effort to make sure your gate is closed so they're not getting out in the first place. It doesn't take much effort to make sure that if you go do a campfire, you actually make sure it is put out before you leave that site diligently. When you understand that it could cost people their lives, it's worth the extra effort to be responsible for the things that you do. And that's really all this is about when it comes down to it. I
agree. A lot of people have this is my life. I'm the star of the show. I'm going to get what I want to get. I'm going to take what I want to take. Get out of my way. If you have something I want, I'm going to take it, kind of thing. And I'm just going to live casually and recklessly, and I don't care who gets hurt. And this is the Lord really saying that, the way that we live does affect the people around us. If you're a thief, it affects the people around you. If you're starting fires and doing your own business on your own land, it could still, if you're careless, affect the people around you. And the Lord's saying, don't be reckless. Don't be careless. You need to help lift up your neighbor, not destroy and hinder and hurt your neighbor. If you start a fire and it gets out of control and it damages your neighbor's stuff, you have to make full restitution. This is a big deal. In the South, a lot of people like to do these bonfires and everything. A lot of people seem to have a fire fascination. And that's all right and everything. But, sometimes you do scratch your head and you think, I hope that thing doesn't get out of control. Well, God says, hey, if it does, you're responsible. In the past, we've had a neighbor who likes to burn leaves and things very close to the house. And sometimes you think, I hope it doesn't get out of control kind of deal. Folks, we just need to be careful. I think the bottom line is that we got to fight the flesh. Don't steal. Don't give into those urges of taking and satisfying your own cravings and things. And the whole idea of being reckless and careless, we need to make sure that what we're doing doesn't hurt our neighbor, kind of thing. Don't throw your trash in your neighbor's yard, kind of thing.
No, we're not switching back to nights. It was just for today. So verses 7 through 15 kind of address the idea of people who borrow from one another. Okay, because this is something that probably they were dealing with a lot of. So it says, if a man deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, let him hold on to some things, and it's stolen out of the house. If the thief is found, let him pay double. That's already been addressed. But if the thief is not found, then the master of the house, because it was in his house, has to be brought before judges, and the judge is going to decide whether or not he was actually responsible. He touched it. If he's the reason why it hasn't been returned, and the judge will decide who actually is responsible for that. If they actually did it, the judge condemns them, then he has to pay double to his neighbor. If not, if the judge finds reason that he's not condemnable, then he doesn't. All right. So, and then verses 10 through 13.
So essentially, the judge is going to find the guilty party.
Yes.
I mean, this is really setting up, I'm going to say it, law and order and kinds of things. And that there is a structure to right and wrong and who settles it and all this kind of stuff.
Then it says, if a man delivers unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, again, and it die or be hurt or driven away, and nobody sees it, nobody sees what happened to them, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, and he that he hath not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good. So the idea is, if you give them an animal and they're like, I don't know what happened to it. We've had animals, we know they can wander, anything can happen to it. If he's willing to make an oath to the Lord that he didn't have anything to do with it, then he doesn't have any responsibility to it. Of course, then he has that oath to the Lord, and that's an entirely different idea. But it says, if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution to the owner thereof. He's got to repay. If it was stolen, he does bear some responsibility. He's got to make sure that the other person gets their item back. It's sorry that he's out of that money or, whatever, but he is still responsible for it. If it's torn in pieces, then he can't help that. Again, that was an animal, and then he's not responsible for it. It says, if a man borrow aught of his neighbor and it be hurt or die, and the owner is not there, then he has to make it good. Like if something happened to it while it's in his charge, he has to pay it back because he borrowed it. But if the owner is still there and something happens, if they're standing around talking together and it, dies right in front of him, that's not the guy's fault. The owner is still on the premises. You know what I mean? So the idea is, they're trying to lay it down into little details just to make sure they understand who is responsible for all of this borrowing.
And something, I'm gonna be honest with you, it kind of makes sense now why we're going through all this, because somebody out there might be saying, well, what was the need to go through all these details? What if this happens? What if that happens? Wait a second. You know what I remembered while she was talking? Mm-hmm. It hit me when Moses is sitting there with the people and his father-in-law Jethro comes and sees Moses going all morning,
Day and night.
all afternoon, and all night, dealing with all the affairs of the people, judging and saying who's right and who's wrong, and straightening this drama out and straightening that drama out. And Jethro was concerned, you're going to wear yourself out. This is not good. You know, this was obviously already in this nation of Israel a problem. Like, there's all this friction and all these things happening. How do we make sense of this? How do we have order here? How do we know what's right and what's wrong? Chaos, you know, and this is, you know, Jethro saw it when dealing with Moses just a few chapters ago. And now we have the Ten Commandments, and now the Lord is kind of he's elaborating on the Ten Commandments of really what he means by each one. And this is how you care for your neighbor. This is what's expected of you. This is what's expected of your neighbor. If one of you fail here, or if one of you fall into sin, this is how we're going to make it right, kind of thing. And this is really straightening it out. You can see the mess that it must have been for Moses dealing with this entire nation by himself. And now you see how it's getting structured now, chapter by chapter, little by little. The Lord is bringing everything into this nice, neat structure kind of thing, and how to deal with one another. I'm sorry.
All right. So now we get to one of the challenging ones. And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. So the idea here is that the Lord is trying to ensure, as we mentioned yesterday, that the women are taken care of.
Yeah.
And the men had consequences if they tried to entice, as the wording of the Bible is, if they were trying to convince these women to try to be with them in a way that they ought not to be.
No.
That and being involved in a physical relationship, they could not just go be involved with a physical relationship with any women. You know, sexually transmitted disease is serious. You know, when you have a bunch of people out in the wilderness, disease is a major issue. And one of the biggest ways it was transferred. And so sexual purity was very important to them for the health and the safety of the people as a whole. So they had to, one of the main goals of the law was to maintain that physical purity. Remember, this is the line Christ was going to come out of, and maintain the health of the people in the community. And by doing so, they required that you were only involved in a sexual relationship within marriage. Mm-hmm. So they also know that man is lustful and has desires, and he's going to attempt to be involved with a young lady without having the responsibility of being married to her. And that this was the way to make that not an issue. If it did in fact entice her and did in fact have a sexual relationship with her, then he was required to marry her. And if her father, who had the decision making ultimately, decided that he could not have, like he was such a wicked man that he did not want his daughter with her, then he had to pay. There was some kind of payment. And that's not to say that, you know, the woman was worth, you know, money. The idea was it had to be something that hurt him. And this was something that was going to hurt him.
A dowry was something that you would put down for a bride. Mm-hmm. The idea is that if the dad said, no, you're not marrying my daughter, my daughter's too good for you, mm-hmm. kind of deal, but you're still going to pay that dowry, mm-hmm. okay? Mm-hmm. Because you shouldn't have crossed the line, mm-hmm. kind of thing. I'll say you said it was a tough one. I actually think that...
Well, I think it's tough for people to understand in modern times. I understand it completely.
Actually, maybe I'm just not much of a homesteader, because for me, it's harder to figure out the ox and the ass. but this kind of thing, I mean, this is the kind of thing that happens in almost any retail store anywhere. You know, there's always, you know, retail or any kind of just in life in general. You know, in high school, you got guys everywhere trying to convince and seduce young ladies, or, you know, into sexual relationships. Just imagine.
But in modern days, people will say, well, what if the woman seduces them?
I know.
You know, all this.
But let's just stick with the man for the moment. Just imagine how few of these things would have happened just in 2020 if every time it happened the man had to marry.
Had to marry her.
You
Or
know?
pay a lot of money.
Yeah, give a dowry plus marriage kind of deal. You're paying and you're taking a bride here. I guarantee you it would slack up a little bit. You know, you still would have men with lust, and you would still have men just doing what they want to do, but it would be a lot less, I'd say. I think, and as laws go, you know, like you said, the law of God is good, but this one stands out of something that I can see how that would very much help the nation of Israel. And then I like in verse 17, that's dad enters into the picture.
Well, the idea he had to pay, the dowry did usually come from the bride's side, but the idea here is that he had to pay an amount comparable to the dowry price. Like he was essentially going to pay for her to marry someone else.
Yeah.
At this point, because he had already, you know, so to speak, had taken on the responsibility of her marriage.
Because you get it, you brought up disease.
Yeah.
But essentially, also, you have to understand, taking away a lady's purity was a big deal.
It was.
I mean, it's a big deal today. It should be a big deal today. But back then, even, I mean, especially in the nation of Israel, that was a very big deal. By doing such a thing, the only way really to make that right would be that, hey, you've got a bride now. She's yours, kind of thing. And that was essentially the idea here, that, hey, you know, you treated her like a wife, so now she's going to be your wife. But when
she'll be someone else's wife on your dime.
Yeah, exactly. And because I like it that they leave the discernment up to dad. Dad enters into the picture
because obviously the girl can't make good decisions.
Yeah.
And the boy isn't making good decisions. So dad's going to make the decision.
Good job, Dad.
Bad job, Dad.
Hopefully. Well, bad job, Dad.
Dad's got a chance to get it straight.
Bad job, Dad, if it was that he raised the child, you know, in a casual way and wasn't very specific on what was right and what was wrong. But in all seriousness, it's a thought within a thought. You can be the best parent in the world.
True.
Your children still have a free nature, a free will.
100%.
And the best parent in the world can still have a rebellious child. You know, I've heard it preached before. You know, the Lord was the perfect parent, and Adam and Eve still did their own thing, kind of thing. So you could have been a great parent, and your kids still went a kind of a crazy direction. It may not be because of your parenting, however, you still have a responsibility here to help straighten this thing out. The dad in this picture here had a responsibility that, okay, the eggs got scrambled, kind of thing, but he had to have some discernment here. Is this man fit for my daughter? And if so, okay. But if not, you're gone. But you're still going to pay the cost here, kind of thing. So, but the Lord, I mean, yeah, I hope you get it. And I get it. The Lord is really just straightening out things that happen all the time, but giving consequences to sin, kind of thing.
Suburban Hillary said, my only question is that, do you think it seems like daughters were not as important as sons, almost like one step above livestock? I personally see it as daughters were more precious because there were more safeguards put around them.
Absolutely.
So that's just how I see it. I mean, having a daughter and having sons, I totally understand the need for safeguards like this.
Because you get the safeguard. I mean, I don't know if you watch like old or read old English books. I don't, and I don't really watch old English films. There's even an English thing like in the Pride and Prejudice.
I was like, when you say English, are you talking about like Jane Austen?
The idea is that a lady like this, she would be, and I don't know of another word, she would be like tainted in a way. And she may fall through society and be seen as something that wasn't precious, you know, not taken care of, not wanted or desired after this young man had his way with her. And I believe that it's not the Lord saying women are not valuable. This is the Lord saying women are valuable. And if you try to taint one in some kind of way, you're going to be responsible for her because she is going to be taken care of. I see this as the Lord's love for a lady, a woman, by saying, okay, if a man mistreats you in some way, I'm going to make it where the man has to take care of you, that you will not be forgotten and thrown, out of society and be scoffed at and mocked and looked down upon. You will be taken care of. I see the Lord being the ultimate Heavenly Father here by caring for his creation, his women, his ladies, his daughters,
All right. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. That's a challenging one. But
challenging. I don't know. Very direct.
Again, when I say challenging, I just mean that's one that, like, in modern times, it just seems to go completely against what modern thinking would be. But you understand that he's talking to his people. These are his people that he rescued, and the law at this point, he's talking to them. And he's saying, and the idea when it says witches, when you look at the
like a sorceress, someone with dark black magic and
someone
and
who is
and charms and
interacting with demons.
Yeah.
And all right, so let me just say, first of all, modern society would think just the idea of someone having interactions with demons is kind of ridiculous. I think people would almost not even take that seriously, like it's a joke. But biblically speaking, it's serious.
It is.
There are a lot of people, like Cynthia said, that dabble in dark things that have no business doing it.
We lived in a house when we moved here where we looked out the back window, and what were they doing?
Just practicing some witchcraft.
Yeah, it was a little like.
I don't want to go into details.
She doesn't want to go into details.
I don't think it's necessary or appropriate.
But what I'm saying,
dabbling in things they shouldn't.
Exactly, and all I mean by saying that is because it makes my wife uncomfortable. Is that kind of stuff, and maybe the curiosity to seek that kind of stuff out. It happens a lot. Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, the Gothic thing was coming, with all the little Gothic music folks and everything. And my point is that a lot of people were getting into that whole kind of thinking. But back in the 80s, they had all the heavy metal stuff, which was a lot of it was leaning. You had the Ozzy Osbournes and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that, and then nowadays with the Harry Potter stuff and all that kind of stuff. I mean, people have always been fascinated with darkness.
But I'm thinking there are a lot of things even in modern days that you see, like little children, and they find dark things on the internet. I remember a story years ago. There were children who got involved with some dark, wicked things on the internet. And it was a couple of young girls, like 12 years old, very young, that had gotten together and decided they were going to murder their friend. And they took her out in the woods and stabbed her. Do you remember that news story? That, yeah. And then she lived. The young lady managed to live. Managed to drag herself out and get help, and she lived. And the two girls that had stabbed her said that they'd gotten involved with some dark things online, and it all came out. And everybody, I think, takes those things so casually, not understanding the danger that it is. And so when the Lord says that you shouldn't suffer a witch to live, the idea is that if someone is dabbling things like that, they are a danger to society, to his society. And it has to be taken seriously. And really a lot of these things are just about protecting his people.
Yeah.
And we're talking consequences here. There's something in modern society that is uncomfortable with consequences. They feel like everybody should just be able to do whatever they want without any consequences. And the fact is, if you want to protect people, sometimes there has to be consequences for actions. And some things have to be taken very seriously, especially if they're dangerous. And this kind of behavior is dangerous. And
I hope you see that it is truly, sincerely dangerous. Mm-hmm. It is. In the book of Jude, it talks about, I believe, Michael, the archangel, he wouldn't even dispute with Satan. That sometimes we think of Satan as this little read with a pitchfork character, and it's almost looks cartoonish, and it's not really scary. Satan is an enemy that we are told not to contend with. The Lord, you defend me. Jesus, you rebuke Satan. Sometimes when I feel like I'm under a spiritual attack, and I'm not being spooky, I'm being serious, when everything seems like it's all right, yet my spirit is really restless, and I sense like that something's wrong, and I feel like I'm really getting attacked here. I'll pray and I'll say, Lord, if I'm under some sort of spiritual attack, rebuke Satan. I mean, just get him off my back, that kind of thing. Satan is not someone for us to contend with. The Lord fights our battles. And the idea is that somebody who's dabbling in sorcery and all this kind of dark stuff of the world, it's not something we should be curious about as Christians. We shouldn't learn more about it. In fact, we should flee from it and say, I don't want to know about that. Don't put it in my head. Don't let me see it. I don't want anything to do with it. Some things should be untouchable for us for our own good. And that should be something that's untouchable, because it does lead. I mean, there's no good in it. There's nothing redeemable about it. It's total and complete wickedness, and we should always, always stay away from it.
And there is in society today, there's some kind of desire for it, particularly with the young people, about things that are wickedness. So like all the books that are written are about dark things.
And it talks about waxing worse and worse. Have you noticed just in your lifetime? I mean, I'm 41, and just in my lifetime, things were never really good, but it seems like things have gotten worse and worse and worse and worse.
Every generation.
I understand that, but it seems, I don't know, it just seems like things have gotten more rather than wholesome. I mean, like when I was a kid, you would have like the Mary Poppins on TV or something, which I guess is essentially even a battle mix. But now it's blood and gore, kind of thing. It's just getting more and more graphic, more and more.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say. It always starts innocently. Yeah. That's why I said they really want to make all of this palatable to children, like it's acceptable. So the idea of a Harry Potter, right? When you think about Harry Potter, we actually started when me and the children were young. I read it with Brian, the first few books, and we watched the first few movies. And at first, it didn't seem like such a big deal. At first, we thought, oh, it's just children, and they're innocent, and they're going to school, and they're with their friends, and all of this stuff. And as we got further along, it got darker and darker and darker, to the point that I actually remember sitting in a movie theater watching a movie with my boys, and everything I was watching on the screen was complete wickedness. And I was like, how in the world, if the Lord came back right now and I'm sitting in this theater with my boys watching this, I am responsible for leading them to this. I was like, this is absolutely nothing I want to be. And from that point on, we stopped reading it, didn't watch any of the movies. And then I started noticing how all the movies were about, vampires and all of the dark things that are out there. And it's like, there's something where they're trying to make evil seem good and good seem evil. And you really have to guard against that, particularly with your children, but even within ourselves, that we understand that there is right, which is God and his way, and wrong, which is anything that goes against that. And that's why we have to know his law, because without it, if we go by society's ideas of right and wrong, it would be really confusing.
This is a little verse. There's a lot that can be talked about just in it, because it really, you can see it in our world today, that it's been a problem.
Yes.
I mean, there's a problem in Egypt, and it's a problem today, kind of thing. You mean there's no witches and sorcery, but we've just given many examples that the spirit of Antichrist does work and is alive and well in the world. I mean, the Bible even teaches that. And just interesting to point out, after the rapture and the church is raptured out, and the Antichrist, a leader, takes the scene to bring everybody into unity. And people will follow him and worship him as if he is God. And one of his things that he does to convince the people the Bible talks about signs and lying, like deceitful, dishonest wonders. He's going to perform sorcery and things like that. And people are going to look at it and say, he's got to be God if he can do all these kinds of things. You follow what I'm saying? There's something very dark and demonic about this kind of thing. The one that does miracles, the one that does the impossible is God. This is talking about being warned about cheap imitations, things that aren't real. Sorcery is man's effort to do God's work, kind of thing. I want to be like God. I'm going to dabble in witchcraft, kind of thing. I'm going to do things that only God can do. And you know what? That's why I brought up Egypt. Because when Moses was standing before Pharaoh and he put down his rod and it became a serpent and it showed that Moses was coming in God's name, Pharaoh had his people put down their rods and they became serpents. And the idea is that the folks that were doing sorcery for Pharaoh, they were doing, witchcraft, which God is condemning here. But you know what it's doing? You know what sorcery does? It gets in the way of what God is doing. God is God, and God performs miracles, and God wants to work. And sorcery will say, hey, I can do what God does, and it gets in the way. And God says nothing should get in the way of what I'm doing in this world. All you folks out there dabbling in dark magic and dark this and dark that and evil this and evil that, it's getting in the way of what I want to do in this world, and it's condemned. It's an abomination. Okay? Be ye holy, for I am holy. Bible says.
Now we're going to go on to another.
You're going to say it. Well, this is a tough one, but I'm the kind of guy.
It's one that's tough because it's one that you don't even think that you need to talk about, but here it is.
Yeah, you do.
Because you do.
Yeah, you do.
So it says, whosoever lieth with a beast shall surely be put to death.
Yeah.
And in my mind, this is something that seems like obvious, that people should not be doing this. People should not be physically involved with animals. It seems almost ridiculous to have to say it. But here's what I know about this one. And it is the last thing I want to talk about. But it's here, so we're going to talk about it.
Well, the Bible study tonight, that's why it's in prime time.
Well, we had to make sure no children are around. Yeah. I do think that's a good and important point.
It is.
So the idea is that
is true. It's not something that's discussed in most children's Sunday school classes.
No, hopefully not.
But it is.
Adults need to know.
It is a topic that is important, that, somewhere in the human heart, God knows that evilness lies, and God needs to straighten it out. That he, that's an abomination.
So here's a few reasons why I know. Not only is this still a problem, but it's worse than you think, and it's infiltrating in ways that you're not paying attention to. So first of all, I had my Frugal Family Food Facebook group, right? A group where people were talking about saving money on their food. And for a long time, I had a trouble with people doing like bots, people kind of corrupting the group, coming into the group and sharing pornographic.
We've had trolls and things like that come on Fundamental Faith. Yeah. But these were people with pictures.
They were coming into the Facebook group and they shared pornography. And at first I would just see all this graphic pornography. We had to block a bunch of people. We had to lock down the group, not let any new members in. We had to really watch how things were posted. And eventually we got rid of all the pornographic material and we got the group back to where it was just what it needed to be. It took a long time, but it happened. Well, then more recently, we had a problem with pornography that included bestiality. Mm-hmm. First of all, I have never seen such a thing in my life. It was incredibly offensive. And it was the same problem. We had to shut down the group, not take any new members in. We had to really watch the posts that were coming in. I mean, it was just, but in the meantime, because it was my group, people were, every time it was coming up, it was just horrific. People would send me these pictures. And they're like, this is in the group, you need to block it. And then I would have to go into the group and take care of it and get rid of it. And the fact is that it's just astounded me that any of that even existed, that people were out there sharing it. Because the problem is a lot of times that people would, what it would do is it was like an infection within in Facebook, that if someone clicked it, then it would be resent to people on their list and things like it was just a mess. And people, I'm hoping that most people were not clicking it because they were interested in it. I'm hoping that most people were trying to click it to report it and end up clicking it, and it was causing a problem. But my soul, it's there, and you almost can't believe it. So it's like, you can't say to yourself, this doesn't really happen. It does. It's there, and I've seen it, and it's horrific. But then I also think that it's more pervasive in life than you realize, in that Brianna is taking an agriculture course. She's getting a degree in agriculture, right? So she's doing an animal science class this semester. And she was telling me all the things that she's been seeing in this animal science book in her agriculture course. And frankly, a lot of the things that they do within modern agriculture are humans getting involved in the animal sexual act. And they try to say it's medical, you know what I mean? They try to make it like extracting semen, and, because the whole idea is they're trying to deal with biological engineering and things like that. But the idea is just that they're getting involved with the animal sexual act in such a way that she had to watch these videos of people doing things that I was shocked. She was like, Mom, come look at this video. And it's just like, I realize she's a college student. I realize she's an adult. But still, there are things that frankly shouldn't even be done. And you don't even realize that that's part of how agriculture happens. And it's like, we've gotten so far away from animals and food systems and things like that. And this is a college level course. This isn't just foolishness on the internet. This isn't just, people involved in craziness. This is something that people think is ethical and good. So when I say that it's pervasive, it's worse than you think. The idea that people are involved in this that have no business being involved. And then there's one other area, if you don't mind me mentioning it, because I've given this a lot of thought. There's this thing called furries, where people dress up as animals.
Oh, I don't know.
Like, have you seen them walking around the store with a tail? And they have like ears? I guarantee you. I guess
I live with blinders on. There's a lot that slips past my radar, I guess.
I guarantee you, if I asked every one of my adult children, they know what furries are. I guarantee you. And the idea that people actually dress up as animals and are excited by animals. And I'm just saying to you that there's so much more out there. You would think that things like this don't even exist. It's not a problem. Why is it even there? It exists more than you think. And the reason why the Lord said that this is not good and people who do this should be put to death is because, frankly, the obvious reason, I think, of course, is because there's a danger of disease, a serious danger of disease. And it's just not right. So, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's practical and that there's the danger of disease. And I think that it's moral. It's just not right. But I just want you to understand that it's here because it does exist. It does happen. And we need to be aware of it.
I'm going to say something.
Please do. I talked like that more than I wanted to talk about.
I know.
But I mean, it's there.
You said it was tough, but the dam was burst open.
It's just shocking. Honestly.
I'm going to say that I think since we started Fundamental Faith, we have done, I don't know how many live events and videos. There's been a bunch, right? But this is a topic in the Bible that's in there, and some people don't even realize it's in there, but it's in there. But I do believe, perhaps, so I've checked the archives, but this is the first time we've covered this. And someone out there might be thinking, well, Rick, this is common sense. It's not, because that's why God put it in the Bible. Okay? If you're 100% in agreement here, amen. But this is talking about mankind as a whole, and man, these are things that God just needs to say and to help us to understand. I just wrote down a couple thoughts for people out there. Just if you let me just take an overview. You talked plenty on
I
it.
don't want to talk about it anymore.
I'm not going to get into the specifics or the details. You know what we're talking about, but I am going to say this: that marriage, okay, is a picture of Christ and His church. That's why marriage is important. Okay, when you see a man and a wife, Christian man and a wife married, you see a living picture of Christ and His church. Okay, so marriage, biblical marriage, is an honor to God, and it's a picture of really Christ and His bride. Okay, and then within marriage, you have that marital relationship, you have sex, and that's between a married man and a married woman. Biblically speaking, God lays it out for us, and it is never to involve anything from the animal world, animal kind or so. Why is that? I mean, and very obvious, I'm going to point it out. If you read Genesis, and we already covered it, months ago, God made man in His image. He made the animals, then He made man. The animals were not made in the image of God. Okay, man was. And folks, that's an important thing, and that's the key. Okay, any kind of relationship like this with an animal, it goes against God's plan for mankind, and it is really a shake of a fist in the face of God, who created us in His image and made us different than the animals. You may take a science class, and they may compare mankind to animals, and that is a pagan view. A biblical view is man is made in the image of God. He is not an animal. Okay. And like you already pointed out, any kind of thing like what we're talking about causes disease. Again, it goes against God's plan for marriage, for relationships, really. It's a rejection of man, acknowledgement that he is made in the image of God. And folks, I want to say something. What would you bring up there? What were they called? With the tails and everything.
Furries.
Okay, I really don't know anything about that. I believe you, but I don't know anything about that. But I have seen this, and you probably have too. In our day, in the time in which we live, I'm not saying that. I mean, it's like, all right, we have cats, and I like cats, and you may be an animal person, but there's a line that you cross, and you got to be careful. We live in a day, in a time where people like to put animals up as almost as much value as people. They put clothes on them, they take them here, they take them there. I think animals are good for like a pet, for like maybe you have an elderly a neighbor or something, and it's company for them, that kind of thing. But you must admit that our world today takes the fondness for animals have become way too much. Just a thought within a thought. There are a lot of people out there that love animal rights, but they're also pro-abortion. They care nothing for an unborn human life, but they'll lay down in the road and protest animal rights. You see, that's just not natural. I'm not for hurting animals, but again, people are made in the image of God, and we are different. And I think this whole verse, let me just say it like this whole verse just echoes this idea that, hey, you're in the image of God, you're different. Okay, get those kind of thoughts out of your head. If they're there, you're different. Okay, so
Yeah, I think that people have put animals on such a level that they do make it equal with man, and it does cause confusion, because there are people who are lonely and love their animals, and the love goes too far.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they feel, because they've placed animals on the same plateau as man, that they feel that it's okay. You couldn't convince them that it wasn't, but it's not. And that's that the problem is, again, that they don't have God in His right place, that they understand that He set the hierarchy and we are all different. Can that be the last we talk on that today?
Yeah. I was wondering if that was going to be tonight, the last verse.
No.
We're at an hour and 14
if
minutes.
you got the time, we could wrap. We could just stay on late and finish the chapter.
We'll face. Oh, YouTube do us away.
All right, if YouTube cuts us off, he'll cut us off. All right, so we'll try to do quickly though. He that sacrificeth unto any god, saving of the Lord, only he shall be utterly destroyed. Now, the idea of a sacrifice is killing something. Now, we talked about Thanksgiving. Whether you believe it or not, Thanksgiving, you are sacrificing a turkey normally for the for honoring the Lord in terms of being thankfulness. So when they talk about sacrifices, right?
That's a worship.
Yeah, it's you understand that it's the idea of something is then killed as a form of worship to the Lord, and we do it all the time, whether we believe it or not. But the idea here is that if you were going to kill something for any other god other than the Lord, then that was completely unacceptable. They needed to be destroyed because, frankly, they would be dangerous. You know,
that the whole idea that the Lord removed the children of Israel from Egypt was that He's the one true God, and His people were going to learn who He was and worship Him. And He says it many, 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 many times, just in Exodus, that I